Hey everyone, welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we've got a massive patch breakdown for you. The new patch 1.07 might be one of the most impactful we've ever seen, as there's a lot of hero tunings and weapon tunings to both the shotguns and the Vandal. Yes, there's a Vandal buff in here. There's a huge amount to get through in this patch, so I'm not going to waste any of your time. We're going to go through it one by one, and I'll offer my quick opinions to every nerf and buff that we see. So with that all said, let's just crack on. Let's begin with the agent updates. Now, first let's deal with Sage, and they've changed her heal. Her heal has been reduced from 100 over 5 seconds down to 60 over 5 seconds, and her self-heal has been reduced from 100 over 5 seconds to 60 over 10 seconds. The devs note, our goal is to reduce the amount of healing done throughout the round, de-incentivize Sage from self-healing, and make it more expensive to do so. She's also had her slow orb changed, and its size has been reduced by 30%. They add, this should slightly reduce the power of slow orb and increase intentionality. Right now, slow orb unintentionally covers a lot more ground than it should be if aimed properly. Moving on to her barrier orb, its cost has been reduced from 400 down to 300, and fortifying barrier, wall forms at 400 HP. After a 3-second delay, the wall becomes fortified to 800 HP. And they add to that, our hope is to increase counterplay on barrier and reduce the strength of the wall during reactive use. Now that's quite a lot of nerfs to Sage. Morello has mentioned before that they're going to try and look at these characters with very high pick rates, especially Cypher and Sage, and we have actually got all these Sage nerfs. So let's just deal with her in totality now. The heal changes will make a very big difference. She effectively won't be able to heal someone who's very low HP up to 100, and as they say, she's now much more de-incentivized to heal herself, as it takes twice the amount of time. Now, slow orb size being reduced will have quite a large impact on the game, simply because when you're trying to take space against a Sage, her having 2 slow orbs with the size that they were meant that they were effectively a no button. Now there might be a bit more counterplay to that. And I think the change that they've made to the barrier is very interesting. So when you first put it down, it's going to be at 400 HP, and then after 3 seconds, it's going to get much stronger up to 800. So that means if you put a wall up against a bunch of people, say on split mid, and they all shoot a section very, very quickly as it's going up, it's going to have nowhere near the same amount of health as it would have if there was no one there really to shoot it. But against multiple people, it's much weaker when you first put it up now. That is huge. Overall, her stall ability has been nerfed quite significantly, in my opinion, and I'm going to make quite a bold prediction here. I think we're going to see a lot less Sage than we did before. Let's move on to Killjoy now. Nanoswarm added a brief wind-up before damage begins. The DPS has been reduced from 60 down to 40, and visual effects have been added to make it easier to spot the grenade on the ground, and stealth audio range has also been slightly increased. They add, Killjoy's Nanoswarm has been a terror to play against. It's meant to be a strong stalling and post-plant tool, but we feel it's currently dealing far too much damage and players aren't able to engage in the desired counterplay. They've also changed her turret. It's no longer revealed by Sova's recon bolt. That's really interesting. And it also more effectively shoots at an enemy's last known location. So on one hand, that's a little bit of a buff in that Sova can't spot it straight away for his team. And also, once you get away from the turret, you're not going to be able to peek out again, as it will continue effectively pre-firing you from the last place that it had spotted you from. So both a bit of a buff and a bit of a nerf for Killjoy. In my opinion, this won't drastically affect her, but I do like how they've tuned some of the very fine counterplay options for her, especially the grenade. Up next is Viper, and they've changed her toxic screen thusly. Can now be placed during the buy phase of rounds through spawn barriers. That's huge. And toxic screen now goes up faster along its full length once it starts to form. They've also changed decay. Decay on all smoke abilities no longer affects allies. That is a huge buff. The developers add, this is mainly targeted towards Viper's pit and should help reduce some of the unintentional collateral damage she can cause to her team, while also opening new strategies for playing around her ult as a team. And Viper's pit has this change. The area of Viper's pit is now shown on her team's minimap when deployed. Okay, so there's a lot to take in there. She can place her toxic screen through spawn barriers. That's massive. But I have to say, decay not affecting her team is absolutely huge, particularly when she pops ult. It's going to be much easier to use it post-plant to make sure that people can't retake on you if all of your team can sit within it. Viper just got some massive buffs. I do expect her pick rate to go up after this. Next, let's handle Breach. The developers add a note at the beginning. These are not all the potential breach changes we want to do, but as part of our ease in intentional balance philosophy, we want to be measured. Stay tuned for more potentially. Okay, that's an interesting detail. Let's look at the actual changes. Flashpoint. Off-screen flashes now match behavior of other flashes in the game and apply a minimum amount of flash more aggressively. Okay, that's pretty good. Charges increased from 2 to 3 and reduced wind-up time from 0.6 seconds to 0.5 seconds. The developers add, breach should be a choice pick in offensive entry and breaking utility. While the flash's power was pretty good, too few charges were holding him back on being able to provide this value for his team. Considering he needs teammates to capitalize on his flashes, this should make up for that cost by simply having more of them. That is a massive breach buff, by the way. Breach might now be S tier. Having 3 flashes in your pocket is absolutely huge. Let's move on. Rolling Thunder. Detonation delay between blasts decreased from 0.3 to 0.255. So that means there's less time sequentially with each blast as it moves forward. So you're going to actually have less time to get out of its way. So that's a slight buff in my opinion. And finally, Concussion. Concuss now de-scopes players and prevents re-scoping. Okay, that's a massive anti-op buff. So if you know where an op is likely playing and you don't need to peek through a wall, you can use Concuss. If they get hit by it, they get de-scoped and they can't re-scope for the length of the stun. That is the kind of anti-op buff that people have been asking for a long time. These changes to Breach are really interesting, and as they say, it's not even their full suite of changes that they wanted to put through. I genuinely cannot wait to play Breach and see what the pros do with him. Shazam has used him before on maps like Ascent. I think Breach is going to get played a lot more at the pro level. Let's move on to Sova. They've updated the physics on Sova's cape so that it should wiggle outside his hitbox less frequently, and polish work on Sova's first-person hands to bring them up to the fidelity bar of the rest of our agents. Thank God, Sova's first-person graphics on his gloves have been buffed. This makes him an absolute S-tier pick. Obviously, I'm joking. But the changes to the cape are actually pretty nice because there have been a few times at the pro level where a Sova player has been spotted just by the cape fluttering around. That will happen less now. So there's some huge agent changes there. This is really going to shift up the meta. I do expect Viper to be played a little bit more. Sage is definitely going to be much less of a must pick. And Breach, in my opinion now, is inarguably the best breaking utility agent in the game. We are going to be seeing a lot more of him. 3 flashes and de-scoping on stun, that's absolutely huge. Let's now move on to the weapon updates. All shotguns, aim punch update. When getting headshot by a shotgun, the aim punch will be lower than all the other weapons. All shotguns, tagging used for targets beyond 10 meters. Hitting an enemy past 10 meters will apply a different tagging value to them instead of the standard tagging. The new tagging is 30% slow for 0.5 of a second on a smooth curve going back to normal speed. The developers add, the goal of these changes is to improve the feel of playing against shotguns and to ensure that they don't end up doing odd things. For example, tagging or aim punching people from longer than expected ranges, and then a teammate ends up killing someone who's debuffed, or makes it hard to fight back against a weapon that should be deadly up close, but fairly non-threatening outside of its effective range. So if you get clipped by a judge from miles away, you're no longer going to be rooted to the spot. That's good to know. The shorty has been nerfed. First fall-off range reduced from 9 meters down to 7 meters. Updated headshot multiplier from 3x down to 2x, now the same as the judge and the bucky. And the devs add, our goal here is to make shorty users work a little harder for the kills they get by requiring them to be a tad closer to their target. And the judge has also been nerfed. The price increased from 1,500 up to 1,600, and the devs add this. Desire here is to see if giving the judge a little hit paired with the other shotgun changes moves the needle when playing against this gun. We'll continue to monitor and make other changes if necessary. And there is in fact a Vandal buff, everybody. It's not the buff that I anticipated, but let's continue on anyway. Increased fire rate from 9.25 to 9.75 and increased damage from 39 up to 40. The devs add, goal is to bring the Vandal in closer competition with the Phantom. We believe these weapons aren't that far off in competition and hope these changes will do that. Now, I thought they might have changed its first shot accuracy. They haven't done that. They've just made it fire faster and do more damage, which is, you know, it's still a buff, people, so I'm definitely going to try it out as soon as this patch goes live. Let me know in the comments what you think about these weapon changes. I know Liam is going to be crying about all the shotgun nerfs, but I don't expect many of you in the comments to agree with him. Next up, we've got an update to the hit impact visual effects. Riot say, we've made some small adjustments to hit visual effects to try and improve hit registration clarity. With how sensitive changes around hit registration can be, we'll be keeping an eye on player feedback on these changes and make adjustments accordingly. They also referred to their previous article about desyncs and how headshot and normal body shot visual effects can get confusing when there are said desyncs. But for these patch notes, let's continue on. Server hit visual effects confirms will now spawn at the location of the hit on the character and stay attached to that position. Previously, it spawned at the game space location and stayed there. They add, we've had issues with hit registration clarity caused by players moving into hit visual effects, i.e. a player crouches their head into the space of a body shot visual effect, which caused confusion on where a shot landed. This change should make it clear where a shot hit and where on the body, even if a character is moving. So previously, if a player crouched while you were shooting at them, they could crouch into where it looked like you would hit their head, but server side you still hadn't, you would hit their body, and that caused a lot of the hit registration problem confusion. Let's carry on. An additional client predicted small spark visual effect now spawns immediately at the game space location of a hit. With the change to attach our traditional server hit visual effects, we wanted to add additional immediate bullet feedback so you can see the area where your bullet landed and adjust your aim accordingly. Think of this new visual effect as an improved tracer. It's important to note that a bullet is client predicted. Seeing this does not mean your shot has registered on the server, very similar to tracers. Adjusted the sparks hit visual effects coloring and shape, adjusted to more closely resemble blood visual effects shape. Context, we want players to be able to play with either of these options without feeling one gives better clarity than the other. And they've adjusted the size of the headshot visual effect where both blood and sparks were scaled down slightly. They add this, especially at large ranges, headshot visual effects would often cover up the head of a player and add additional difficulty in tracking players through the effect. We've scaled down this visual effect slightly in an attempt to make it easier to keep track of your targets. So that's a whole bunch of changes to how the visual effects and feedback of hitting a player works. Hopefully these do improve player experiences with tracking enemies after you've hit them a few times and adjusting your aim, as I think that was actually the real biggest problem with a lot of those issues concerned with visual effects. Next up, we've got changes to the competitive mode. Remake match. When a match begins with a 4 versus 5 or more lopsided teams, players will now have the option to end the game they're in and queue for a new one. Okay, that's huge. If any player is disconnected at the start of a match, beginning of buy phase, through the entire first round, a remake call can be triggered at the start of the second round by typing /remake in the chat. All connected players on the team that called the remake may vote to remake the game. It's required that all connected players agree to remake. The remake vote will last for the duration of the buy phase. If the vote is not passed by the end of buy phase, it will expire. If the vote is successfully passed and the game is remade, all players who voted do not receive any XP or MMR adjustments for the match. The match will also not show up in match history. All disconnected players not part of the vote will take a full MMR loss for the game, so effectively you can't dodge and cheese this, and receive a leaver penalty equivalent to disconnecting from a full match. Act ranked visuals have been updated to better differentiate wins at different rank tiers. Change some potentially misleading verbiage in the restriction message for players who need to play more unrated games to unlock competitive play. They add, this is to better reflect that Deathmatch and Spike Rush do not count towards unlocking competitive. And finally, we've got these quality of life changes. Observers can toggle aim lines for players, default bind R. Observers can change which team's outlines are visible, defaults H, all, J, friendly to spectated player, K, enemies of spectated players, and L for none. Corpse markers shown when corpses are disabled now obey colorblind settings. Hotkey order for selecting players for observers should no longer shuffle in overtime. Observers should now see the money on the HUD for the player they are spectating. Added a setting for disabling the in-game UI. Added a setting for disabling the crosshair. Observers can hide first-person character arms. That's very good. Observers can toggle team-based crosshair coloring for spectated targets via the settings menu, and improve the frame rate by allowing a wider variety of visual effects to be multi-threaded. Examples include Brimstone Sky Smokes and Breach's Rolling Thunder. For anyone who'd rather keep their identity private in-game, we've added these features. Hide my name from non-party members, the agent name will be used, and hide the names of others in my game who aren't in my party. Agent names will be shown. These features take effect from agent select to game end. We've also added an option to hide and auto reject friend requests, so that's pretty good. And that's about it for this absolutely massive patch. This will have a huge impact on the game. I really want to hear your guys' feedback about a lot of the agent changes and the weapons. Are we all Vandal mains now? Well, I already was, but I do expect a fair few of the Phantom Gang to at least try it and maybe swap over. I'm sorry, Liam, about the shotguns. You'll just have to deal with that. Jet super flying judge plays will still be a thing, I think. But overall, I'm really happy with this patch. Can we get a shout out from all the Viper mains in there using Viper's Pit and not decaying their teammates? I still can't believe they're going to let her use her wall in the buy phase. That's absolutely massive. As you might be able to tell, I can't really contain my excitement. I can't wait to play. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to leave us a like. If you like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Also, check out our Facebook stream. We are No Lifing Valorant over there, and it would be great to see some of you in the chat. Until next time.